On August the 18th in Hangzhou, the capital of Zhejiang province, China launched the world's first court specializing in handling internet-related cases. The cases taken on by the court will be tried online. From case filings to the court hearing, plaintiffs and defendants can have their disputes handled at much lower cost and without the necessity of being in a physical courtroom. What changes will the Internet Court bring to China's judicial reform, and what challenges face the new court and the way it handles cases? To discuss these issues related to Internet Court and more, I'm pleased to be joined here by He Jing, founder of Anjie Law Firm, and Lin Yongqing, founder and CEO of China Value Think Tank. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. But first, let's take a look at this background report.
A copyright infringement case is being heard in the city of Hangzhou. What's unique is that neither the plaintiff nor the defendant's lawyers are physically present in the courtroom. The plaintiff is the writer of a novel that inspired a popular Chinese TV series. She is suing Chinese internet firm NetEase for the unauthorized use of her works. All this is taking place at the Hangzhou Court of the Internet, which has been in operation for about 2 months and was officially opened last week.
Since our court went into operation in May, 2,605 cases have been filed, and 1,144 of them were settled.
The new court handles the city's lawsuits concerning areas such as online shopping disputes, copyright protection, internet loans, and domain name disputes. Legal officials believe the city of Hangzhou, which is home to tech giants such as Alibaba, is the ideal place to house such an innovation.
Hangzhou has the largest number of websites, e-commerce platforms and third-party payment platforms anywhere in China. Its cloud computing, big data, mobile payment and smart logistics industries play a leading role in the world.
This is not just a traditional court with an internet homepage. They have moved all procedures, including filing, delivery, deposition and court sessions, online. Legal experts say it makes sense, since internet-related disputes usually transcend geographical boundaries. In the past, coordination across jurisdictions consumed extra resources. Now, the entire process can be done online, as long as there is access to an internet connection.
Citizens don't even need to leave their homes. Filing an internet lawsuit can be as easy as shopping online.
This has made the legal process much more efficient.
Each court session lasts an average of 25 minutes, and each case is completed in an average of 32 days.
All internet-related cases filed in Hangzhou will gradually be separated from the existing judicial system and dealt with exclusively by the new court. Officials say they will develop applications of big data, cloud computing and AI technologies to build a smart court for the internet age.
Well, what's the driving force behind China's launch of the world's first e-court?
I would say e-commerce. It's really the e-commerce. China, the e-commerce has been really in the explosive growth, right? In the last probably 5 years. Alibaba is now the king probably of this part. And that's also where the court is established this time, the internet courts. The Hangzhou is probably the capital of the China e-commerce. So, but with the growth of e-commerce, there's a huge amount of disputes. The e-commerce disputes. The product defect, the cases, the internet loans. Actually, a lot of loans right now being made on the internet. So you can imagine there's so many disputes that when those disputes were presented to the court, it actually gives a huge amount of pressure on the judges. So it's very interesting to see China now launches this internet court to trying to start something new to handle this kind of massive amount of the cases.
Well, this first e-court was launched in Hangzhou, which is known as He Jing says, for being the capital of e-commerce. It has a large concentration of technology companies like Alibaba. But what do you think of the potential for the rest of the country to develop the same e-court?
Yeah, we think rest of the country they also have the chance and the demand to develops such kind of e-call. For example, we just read the news 2 days ago. There is another e-call also emerged in Fujian province. So we will not say only Hangzhou have this kind of condition or capability to develop such a thing.
But it is indeed a very impressive pilot program for the rest of the country, if not for the rest of the world to follow suit in the age of digital technology. And pretty soon we're going to have the era of AI, artificial intelligence. Right. We can hardly foresee what's going to happen next.
Right.
However, what kind of cases can be accepted by the Internet Court?
Right now, if you're looking at the rules, actually, it's both fairly broad and also fairly narrow. Why I say that? If you look at it, it covers the 6 or 7 type of cases. For example, the e-commerce cases. Those are buyer-sellers cases. Okay. The second type is the internet loan case. If I make a loan from someone, the internet service provider, if there's disputes, this kind of case. And the third one is very interesting. It's called personal defamation case. So if someone says something very, very bad about me, about the company can sue, right? That's the person damages their reputation through the online statements. Also, it covers the product quality cases. We say that the product liability cases, and some kind of domain name cases. But keep in mind, even though when you looking at it, the types of the cases are broad, but it got to have something related to Hangzhou. Okay, it means that very likely if you are plaintiff, you gotta be someone in Hangzhou, or if there's a seller, the seller gotta be in Hangzhou. So so there are some rules. I think it's mostly trying to make it easier for people who cannot be in Hangzhou, but they need to litigate in Hangzhou court. This is I think that's probably part of the design of this court.
What are your thoughts about the competitive edge of an internet court compared with the traditional conventional court, since you are an expert of digital technology?
Yeah. We think that one of the key factor for this competition, because it's sort of e-court have very high efficiency. For example, every people or the case, they can deliver online their materials, evidence. Yeah. So you need not to physically go to the site. This is one factor. The other thing is sort of transparency. All the materials, evidence online be track record, and even the later stage like e-call hearing, right, also online can be video recording. So it means sort of process. The whole process will be recorded. So it can make people, make the whole stakeholders be more transparency.
One thing I find actually very interesting is that the video taping of the whole hearing. It's not really taping, right? It's really streaming, because when both sides, the plaintiff defendant showing up in front of a computer screen, they have a camera, they record the whole thing. Then when you can save the whole file as a record. Okay, that's a really fascinating part. Actually, I personally find that very attractive. The second part is that they're also using this audio, the input technology, the voice input technology. They're gonna record your statement, like plaintiff statement or defendant statements. They use the technology to transcribe the whole thing automatically. Okay, I'll be very curious about the accuracy of the transcribing, but we know at least some of the Chinese audio transcribing technology has been very, very good. Okay, so that saves the trouble to transcribe the whole court hearing. Then you can electronically save it, and that's make it much easier for the record. Right now, for our traditional court, every time we have to rely on the court clerk to type And then sometimes we have to wait there for quite a while after the end of hearing. But this one will make it much more efficient.
Yeah.
You know.
And also, I would like to give another input. More than that, it's not just open to the stakeholders. I mean, not just open to the two party of lawsuit. It also open to, in theory, it can open to everybody, because each party can invite their friends, their, like a colleague or their supporters.
But I'm afraid that has a lot to do with one's privacy. Now, if,
well, trials are supposed to be
concerned.
public. Trials, the court hearing is supposed to be public unless there's some reason to have a closed-door hearing. China is being, as part of the judicial reform, right? They want to make the trials more public. But it used to be the case that it's not that so easy for you to allow lots of people to show up in the courtroom, okay, for practical reasons. But in this way, probably will make it much easier. But even though for most of the cases are going to be handled in the internet court are those smaller claims, small claims. The threshold of the cases for those long cases are below 500,000 RMB. So it's supposed to be smaller. So it may not be that many people. But like you said, family members want to see it, but they don't want to travel to Hangzhou. So this technology will make it
right.
convenient.
The average time of hearings conducted online was only 25 minutes to the internet court. Is it reasonable? And how does the internet court have a high efficiency? I mean, average of less than half an hour. That's amazing, isn't it?
In fact, actually, I was speaking to a contact at the internet court. They were telling us that they have started some big data analysis, not just for this court. Okay, keep in mind this is not the very first time. This is the internet court was built on like at least a 2-year experiment. In Hangzhou, they already tried out this kind of e-court system for the last 2 years. So been having some kind of data. So the judges are very familiar, based on especially big data analysis. They know that the typical kind of cases, when the typical e-commerce cases happens, there's only certain case scenario. So when you find new cases, it's very likely fall into some the existing or known types. So the judge pretty much know how to handle it. So they can tell you. They can, the plaintiff defendant will have a much fewer disputes. That's why this is the reason that it can be conducted so fast.
What other internet-related cases can be more easily handled by such a court of virtuality, the online court, other than violation of property rights and defective products? What else can be handled by such sort of e-court?
Yeah, actually, I think we consider very optimistic for internet. From my view, many things can be handled virtually. For example, if some such as business negotiation, for example, some business conference. Now, for most of people or for most of business affair, all the people they are doing just communication. So everything related to or they belong to the sort of category can also be done by internet virtually,
right,
or by distance.
I think there's two characters. One is that the defendant have to agree to it. The first question for this kind of cases is, how would the defendant agree to accept this dispute, right? In many cases that you have the trouble that, hey, defendant not really responsive. How can you find them? But for this one, from what we heard, that the court will try everything, even using the social media. They're using this Ali Wang Wang, those the Ali's social media to notify the potential defendant. So that's a very interesting part. The second thing is that I think it could be tailored to all kinds of, mostly in business cases, I would say, the civil or commercial cases. And even for complicated cases, maybe certain pre-trial hearing can be done in this way. Looking at it, this could be part of a video conference, okay? You can use a video conferencing to handle part of the problems, like factual issues. But when you come to complicated arguments, complicated factual legal issues, when you need to have the lawyers to be involved, significantly, then it's definitely not suitable. Not suitable for this kind of internet forum. For this right now, for this kind of cases, it's more for probably we call people court. Okay, for regular, ordinary people's consumer type of cases, or even for some kind of infringement cases.
Mm-hmm. What about the most controversial issue of presenting evidence?
Whether the evidence is real or not, whether it's true or false, okay? But however, for the e-commerce cases, the evidence are pretty reliable, okay? Whether the transaction happened or not, whether someone, like a buyer, right, ordered their stuff or not, whether the payment was made or not. Mm-hmm. Those are relatively less controversial. But for the other type of cases, when you come to the kind of evidence, when the documentation is real or not, when when you're trying to say, hey, whether this particular large contract is real or not, then probably the online forum will not be reliable. But for online e-commerce cases, even for personal defamation cases, did you say something in the social media against another person? That's pretty obvious. Okay, that's non-controversial. That's why it's suitable for the internet court.
What are the traditional physical court that cannot be replaced by the internet court?
That then plenty. Any complicated cases, right? Maybe for selfish purpose, any cases where lawyers or substantial involvement are required. Keep in mind, for this kind of special claim cases, very likely you don't even need a lawyer. Very likely. I think that's a design. They're supposed to make it cheaper, faster for consumers, for netizens. But when you have a very large, substantial commercial case, we really need lots of the legal involvement, lots of evidence involved. And then probably the offline courtroom are still the way to go.
But I'm afraid Alibaba will come under fire sooner or later for at least one simple fact. It possesses the big data. And behind the screen, it is the Alibaba or Alipay that the big data. And once Alibaba itself is involved in a lawsuit, it's one of the parties in the lawsuit, then what can be done to make sure that this is absolutely a fair play and that the interest group of Alipay or Alibaba will not interfere with the integrity of the verdict?
Yeah.
Now this will make a sea difference, right? Since the Alipay or Alibaba is a major player in the e-court because of technical reasons, then we run the high risk of having a partiality, or the idea of impartiality will be seriously undermined because of the established interest of Alibaba. I mean, this is just an assumption.
Yeah, we think in this case, Alibaba take two roles. On one hand, it's the service provider. Actually, you can call them the infrastructure service provider. We all know in this e-court several years ago, Alibaba already working in cooperation with Hangzhou government to provide their Ali Crowd service to help this kind of experiment. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if Alibaba can meet some lawsuit itself, it can also face the risk of interest conflict. So my suggestion is, if this happens, we can introduce a third party other than Hangzhou court, maybe Beijing court or Shanghai court, to a more fair judge party. This is one thing. But your question also remind me another issue thinking. There's another thinking issue is bigger than this thing, because from the interest or the regional thinking of Alibaba side, he will never try to take this risk to avoid or to challenge his right position, or how to say, his right his right position. Another big issue right is like the big data. The big data, the ownership of big data is a more critical issue. For example, many people do the e-commerce, but the big data belong to Alibaba or belong to the individual specific person or party. Another example, every people use WeChat of Tencent. There are already tons of huge number of big data already. We can ask the question, how is the big data, or how we handle the ownership? Is it belong to the Tencent or belong to everybody?
Those kind of cases will be really dealt with in a more traditional court form. It's a much bigger. Okay? It's actually even much a policy issue. But coming back to your question, whether there's any conflict interest, right, for Alibaba in this kind of cases. But right now, I don't think that's kind of concern. It's because this is for e-commerce cases. Really, it's about the dispute between the buyer and the seller. Okay. Or someone say something bad, against another person. So the platform, which is an online platform right now, is really not touched here. And also keep in mind, among all those cases where sometimes Alibaba's platform cases, that's a trademark infringement cases, are not even one type of cases that the Internet Court has a jurisdiction over. Okay, so, but I think Alibaba is much more important for this case. Is for enforcement purposes. If I'm a buyer or seller, especially if I'm a buyer, I want to get my money back. I really will want the court to freeze the Alipay account of this seller, so I have a much better opportunity to make sure I can get my money back. So that will be a powerful tool. It'll be a very, very powerful tool. So I think the court's enforcement process may highly I would say dependent now, probably really need the help from the Alibaba as a platform. But they are relatively neutral at this moment to this Internet Court.
Next stage, I'm afraid, is the work of legislation. Do you think the National People's Congress, our lawmaking body, will have to do something to establish a set of litigation rules for the online court to operate, and to set a role example for the rest of the country to follow suit? This is a matter of lawmaking. What do you think? In China, as a pilot program, experimentally, we just go ahead, get the job done, then we follow the experiment with some regulations. But regulations cannot replace laws. There must be legislation moving forward. What do you think?
I would say the legislation is probably more important on the jurisdiction issue, or in our language is which court have the power to adjudicate in what geographical scope when the cases happens. Right now, for this Hangzhou court, it really adjudicates the cases have the big components related to Hangzhou. Okay, if you have a dispute with some person in Jiangsu, you cannot really litigate in Hangzhou for this. But that will require the court, eventually may require the the legislature to say, hey, maybe we should set up a few very powerful regional court can cover quite a few provinces and deal with this kind of cases. Then we'll make it much more meaningful. But that requires the amendments of the law. For the rules itself, it's okay. Actually, the rules how to exactly conduct the trials is actually already been established by the Hangzhou Internet Court. But I would say, personally, I would say the next part is a jurisdiction.
Whether it's the physical court or cyber court, eventually, by the end of the day, people ask the question about the independence of judiciary. Do you guys believe transparency will help reinforce the idea of having independent judiciary? Because many of the general public would always be excessively concerned about the possible intervention from the local government with the judicial procedures. I mean, after all, local courts or procuratorate are at the mercy of the government's financial support. If I were to be at the mercy of your financial support, what can I do if you have breached the law, the regulations, infringed upon the trademarks? I can do nothing, right? So do you think transparency through the social media, through the online, will help promote public trust about the integrity of the judiciary? Now, you may not have the Western standard of judicial independence, but much more transparency through the use of the internet may help promote the confidence of the general public. Do you agree with me?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, it's also kind of social supervision. Yeah, you use this kind of transparency is a very critical character from internet, because every case, the whole process, if we open to the public, we also introduce many people. They are like take role like a supervisor. So the judges, even the core government office, they have to consider very carefully about their behavior.
Right. China has been doing something very interesting. In fact, and China already starting, a lot of courts already, actually national courts starting publicize all the case decisions online. That's actually tremendous. Okay, you really can see the court judgments more and more. And that's also allow some third-party service provider to analyze, to publicize, and reuse those judgments. The next step we're hoping for our lawyers, we're really hoping that at least for most of the important cases, let's say like our IP cases, you can see the complaints. You can see the complaints filed by both sides. So you can really know the very first hand that who filed what cases against who. And that will give a lot of public information to people. That allows, the system like amicus brief and stakeholder, important stakeholders, professors, industry groups can file very important submission to the court on some of very, very important cases. So that's kind of a transparency at a sophisticated level will really contribute to the impartiality.
Look me in the eye and honestly tell me, are you afraid of losing your job with the arrival of the artificial intelligence? Because robots might be used for lesser costs and play the role of the lawyer. Are you afraid of being, fired by the law firm?
Well, I think the human will be replaced by robots. Okay, but hopefully in the near future, we'll still can retain some of the things that the machine cannot do.
Well, I understand your confidence, but I have a big question mark about the prospect of whether we're going to have as many lawyers as we do today.
Yeah. You have a good job. Your job will not be replaced.
My job is to raise questions. Well, thank you with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.